So in week one, we're going to be looking at a couple of different topics that have different formulas, and I have some tips and tricks for those. So the first one is going to be the simple interest formula. And the great thing about questions that involve simple interest is that they're typically going to say simple interest. So when we're dealing with simple interest, we're looking at I equals my principal times my rate times the amount of time. And something that's important to distinguish is that your rate and your time have to be in the same units. So if my rate is 10% monthly, even if they tell me 1 year, I need to convert that to 12 months so that my time units match. My rate is going to be the percent as a decimal. So those are two important distinctions of places you can go wrong. So if I invest $1,000, that means my P is 1,000. And if my rate is 4% annually, and I leave it in there for 5 years, to find the amount of interest that's going to be accrued, I would do 1,000 times my rate, which would be 0.04 as a decimal because I take the decimal place and I move it twice, times my time, which is 5. So what does that find? That finds the amount of interest that I'm going to make. Okay, so it does not find a payment. It finds the amount of interest I'm going to make. So the great thing about the Web 2.0 calculator is I'm going to type it in exactly like it looks on my worksheet. And if you look at the top, it is showing things at the top as they are. So that means that if I invest this at 4% for 5 years, there we go. I'm going to make $200 in interest, and that's $200 over the 5 years. So that's my interest amount. Now, if I want to solve for different things in this equation, I'm simply going to follow the rules of solving one-step and multiple-step equations. So let's say that I make $500 in interest, and I want to know if I invested $1,500 at, let's say 3%, how long would it take me to get to 500? So if I wanted to solve that, I would just start plugging in my formula. So I'd have 500 is the amount of interest I made, times my principal, which is 1,500, times my rate as a decimal, times my amount of time. So at this point, I can do 1,500 times 0.03, and that gives me 45. So what this becomes is 500 equals 45t. So I would divide both sides by 45, following the rules of solving an equation. And at that point, I know that it is going to take me 11.11 years. So the simple interest formula is pretty straightforward on solving. The compound interest formula just has a little bit of an extra step. So when I'm dealing with the compound interest, I typically see the word A, and you're going to see P naught, 1 plus RT, 1 plus R raised to the T. Let me erase that. Now, in this case, a couple of places where you make mistakes. R has to be a decimal. The units of R and T have to match. So if this is 5 years, but I tell you 5% monthly, I have to do 5 times 12 to get months. So my R and my T unit of time has to match just like in the previous question, and my R does have to be a decimal. So let's say that I invest $100. So if I invested that, that's my P naught. That's what I started with my investment. I invested at 0.5% monthly for 6 months. So 6. So my months match 5% monthly. So to plug this in the formula, I would do 100 times 1 plus 0.005, because I have to move it 2 times, raised to the 6. So how am I going to enter this in Web 2.0? I'm going to type it in like this. Let me clear this out. 100 times 1 plus 0.005, and notice that's just like it looks. Now, to get the exponent key, you're going to hit Shift 6 to get that caret. And we said 6 months. Now look at this up here. Do you see how this is the same as what I had written on my screen? So I hit enter because my formula is correct. And now we'd have $103.04. Now what is that? That is not the interest. That is the actual value of your account. So essentially I made $3.03. That is my actual value of what's in the account, assuming I just let it sit there for 6 months. So over 6 months, I made $3. This is why a lot of people don't invest in savings accounts anymore, because it's much harder. So when we're solving for different things within this, most of the time the question typically tends to ask, how much did you invest? So let's say that my current value in a savings account, so current value A, would be $1,200. That's my current value. I invested it at 7% annually, and I invested it for, let's say 4 years. That sounds about right. So in that case, I would have my P0 times 1 plus 0.07 raised to the 4. So at this point, I need to get rid of the 1 plus 0.07 to the 4th power. So there is a couple ways you could do this. I could type this piece into my calculator, but the problem is there can be some rounding error with that. So what I actually do is I would have my 1,200 over here, and I would divide both sides by that entire amount. So that way I just get the most accurate answer without having to copy down 6, 7, 8, 9 decimal places. So if I type that in Lib 2.0, this is how that's going to look. As 1,200 divided by 1 plus 0.07 raised to the, how many years did we say? To the 4. So notice at the top, I'm checking everything. The 0.07's in the denominator. It's raised to the 4th power. So I'm going to hit equal, and that means I invested $915.47. So that's the basics of what we're looking at this week. You're going to get a little more in-depth look as you get into the knowledge path. And as you're in the knowledge path, please remember you can continue to update your score to get a higher score. So you don't have to take the initial score. If you want to go back later in the week and work on it some more, you can do that, and your score will update. It's not immediate. We only update twice a week, but the next time you go to the knowledge path, it will definitely update. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and it begins to help you understand the interest formulas.